Now on Indianapolis This Week, the controversy over the new Justice Center. Will the fight over trouble at The Rock derail the mayor's big plan for 2015? We go one-on-one with a leading council Democrat. Plus, we take you inside the State House as lawmakers come back to work to talk about spending your money and the story behind the Mitch Daniels decision to skip a run for president.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. As we begin a new year, 2015 starts with an almost immediate battle over the mayor's plan for a new criminal justice center. That plan, $408 million facility at the site of the former GM stamping plant. It would include a 3,000-bed detention facility with on-site medical and mental health units, community corrections, and more than 36 criminal courtrooms. Council Democrats are threatening to hold up the project, angry over what they call hidden costs in the city's deal for the Regional Operations Center.
The Justice Center is one of those things that's been kicked down the road for at least 20 years, maybe 30 years. People couldn't get it done. They just couldn't figure out a way to get it done, either politically or financially. We think we've got a great model for it. I think it works. Both sides of the aisle know it has to be done, and so I'm hoping that we get this thing done.
We welcome now this morning Joe Simpson, a Democrat member of the City County Council representing the 9th District. He's a member of the Council's Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee and served on the Washington Township Board before joining the Council. Welcome to the program. Will you hold up the contract for the new Criminal Justice Center?
We will be looking at probably a delay. When the mayor spoke about both sides of the aisle is in favor or looking for this, that is incorrect. I am not and have not been in favor of this Justice Center because of the Regional Operations Center, the Rock. And the Rock is a situation in which when Troy Riggs came here, he came out of the facility for various reasons, which caused me to say, what's wrong with this picture? And then at the same time, public safety budget was in a deficit. And when I started doing my own investigation, come to find out that they were paying $50,000 a month, close to $60,000 a month for the operation, for renting that facility out there. $1 million in total when you get through with the utilities and everything. And it was, they didn't appropriate any money for this, and it put the public safety $1 million in the hole.
Yeah, let's break this down. So the mayor wants a contract on the new Criminal Justice Center. He wants it signed at least by March the 31st. Is that going to happen, March the 31st?
I would say no.
So that's not going to happen?
No. Okay.
The other issue, of course, is that we have now this Regional Operations Center, which was supposed to be the hub for public safety for the big events like it did for the Super Bowl. We are paying $18 million over the next 25 years. Was that a waste of taxpayer dollars?
At this point, yes, it is. It was a deal, a lopsided deal, where Alice Curl, who is the owner of this facility, got a sweetheart deal. It was a deal, the little that we know about it right now, we're beginning to understand more, is that it was a credit lease, a lease in which the city used it credit for Alice Curl to borrow the money.
So it's fair enough then to say that you are not moving forward with the next big city project until you understand this contract?
Yes, correct.
So on Thursday you begin hearings. Are you going to issue subpoenas to bring in maybe the mayor or Frank Straub? I mean, what is that going to look like when these hearings begin on Thursday?
Frank Straub, since we've learned, and you've probably seen some of the emails, we learned that Frank Straub was not in favor of this particular site. We are planning, if all possible, to go visit Frank Straub and ask him questions where he's at in Spokane.
So no subpoenas then?
No subpoena.
Are you surprised at all that Mr. Straub, who really became the poster boy for this, for The Rock, as it's known, he was in favor of this thing? He went all over, up and down the media saying this is the best thing. So was he lying to the public when he was saying it's the best thing, but at the same time he was sending emails, this is not a good thing?
Well, I think that it was about the location for him. I think it was a good thing as far as in his mind to bring it all these operations all under one facility. He saw a big picture, and his picture was really hoping to find a facility in which he could house this at. The problem he ran into was that the mayor's office, now that we know, wanted at the regional operation, the Rock, which is out there at the old Eastgate Mall.
We only have 30 seconds left, so when these hearings begin on Thursday, what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, Thursday we're not going to hold it. I just wanted to inform you that because Attorney Biesecker was on vacation, so we'll post a date in which we're going to get together. But what we're hoping is to bring in individuals who are very familiar with this lease, and we want to know why was this lease done on the taxpayer's back.
A lot of questions that we also have. We'll be following the story as it develops. Counselor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Come back to the program anytime. I'm sure we'll have many more questions for you as this moves forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Coming up on Indianapolis this week, getting back to the business for state lawmakers. We take you inside the State House to get you ready and ask our insiders what might actually be accomplished. That's next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. Tuesday marks the return of state lawmakers to the Capitol for the start of the new General Assembly. Our State House reporter, Katie Hines, is getting ready as well.
We're preparing for the start of a long session. Lawmakers' focus will be writing a budget for the next 2 years. Republicans say they're cautiously optimistic based on the revenue projections. Republicans, Democrats, and the governor agree education must be a priority, but they differ in their ideas of where the money should go. We're also watching for hot-button political issues to surface. The debate over control of the State Board of Education isn't expected to end anytime soon. A bill has already been filed to make the state's top education official an appointed position, a choice of the governor. And as for the governor and his future, another proposal would allow Mike Pence to appear on the ballot for both governor and president if he chooses to run. Rafael, back to you.
Katie, thank you so much. And now we welcome our political insiders, Lara, Beck, and Abdul, Hakim, Shabazz, to the roundtable. It's going to be a very interesting 2015. On the issue of education, the governor says it's the priority. Is that the priority?
Yes. There's more money in the budget, not as much as we would like to have, but there's more money. So education, there will be more dollars. The battle will always be over how do you spend it and the changes that are going to come to the school funding formula. I'd not be surprised if everybody gets a little bit of a bump, everybody gets a little bit more money, but the question is going to be when you have school districts that are getting smaller, should they get more money as opposed to school districts who are growing rapidly?
I think there will be a very spirited and robust argument over equity and parity when you look at the General Assembly. And I think one of the things that we forget a lot of times in Indianapolis is that not every district is like Central Indiana. I mean, you've got a lot of very different districts throughout the state, and they have different needs, and so there's going to be a lot of fighting there. The other thing that he and I were talking a little bit about in the green room, because we actually do talk to each other in the green room, is the 21st Century Scholars Program that came out over the New Year's holiday and kind of right after Christmas, about the fact that there's $90 million there that no one accounted for, no one really thought we would need, but we do, and Senator Kenley said we've got an obligation to fund that, so you've got to take that off the table right away.
And what will be the pressure on charter schools? This governor wants more charter schools, which means at the end of the day, less money for the traditional public schools.
But here's what we forget when we talk about less money for the traditional public schools. The point of education is to educate children. It is not to employ adults, and dollars should follow the children to wherever they go. And if the kids go to a traditional public school or charter school, then that is where the money should follow. It's that simple. I believe public schools are capable of competing with the right leadership, and they do the right things with charter schools. We see new leadership in IPS, so public schools shouldn't look at charter schools as a threat to their funding. They should look at it as an opportunity for them to do a better job and keep kids within their walls.
We have a major issue in Indiana. We are on the leading edge of quote-unquote education reform, and what we're seeing a lot of is that for-profit charters, and that basically are for-profit businesses in the business of quote-unquote educating children, they don't really work that well. And so again, you're going to see I think a divide between Central Indiana and some of the other school districts, because in a county like Switzerland County, for example, that school district in beautiful Vivi, that school district probably is a large employer, and people are very proud of those schools. They may not want charters coming in, so it's going to definitely be a tension.
Another hot button issue for this legislature will be the issue of alcohol sales. Will we be finally able to buy, if we want to buy, alcohol on Sundays?
It'd be nice. I mean, because I can't think of anything better than enjoying a cocktail and martini with this program while watching us, because the more we drink, the more sense we make. No, I mean, it's interesting that finally Sunday sales will actually get a hearing, more likely get a committee vote. The Speaker caught a lot of people off guard when he basically said he can't see the logic and rationale behind the Sunday sale prohibition ban. But then again, you have lots of the liquor store owners who don't want to compete with the Krogers and the Walmarts and other big box stores.
By the way, we have chilled orange juice for you in the green room. But you were going to say?
Me too. Yeah, there's always a run for Sunday beer at my home on Saturday. But I think, in my personal opinion, I don't know if this is the most important thing that we're going to be legislating this session. I mean, there are so many other things that we need to be concerned about, and especially in terms of as we look at income equality, especially as we look in terms of education and where this state is headed. And I don't know if really this is going to be, for me, the top button issue. I think we have a lot more important
one issue that is raising a lot of eyebrows, Lara and Abdul, is the issue, of course, Mike Pence, our governor, back in Indiana after a 9-day trip to Israel. And as he's coming back home, now there's talk, of course, that Senator Mike Delph wants to push a bill that would allow Mr. Pence, if he chooses, to run for governor and also for president. Now, he's told us already that he will not make an announcement on that presidential decision until after the legislature. Will this bill go anywhere? And what was Senator Delph thinking?
I actually spoke to Mike Delph on New Year's Eve around the cliff and asked him about, okay, Mike, what's going on here? He told me they didn't get.
You had an exciting New Year's Eve.
Of course. I mean, he said he didn't have a conversation with the governor's office prior. He was doing it on his own. He thought it was only fair to at least start the discussion about letting the governor run for dual offices, seeing how like a John Kasich of Ohio or Rand Paul in Kentucky, can both run for their respective offices and run for president. So he didn't want to have the governor on opposite footing. The bigger story, though, Rafael, in that same bill is that it allows any state rep or state senator to also run for federal office, either be at the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate.
Is that practical? I mean, should people just have one job?
Yeah, I think people should have one job. And for all we know, maybe Mike Delph has presidential aspirations.
Actually, none. I did ask him that. He said no.
He's quite the guitarist and quite the musician. So who knows? Maybe he's got presidential aspirations. But again, there should be more important things we're focusing on in the General Assembly. And if I were Governor Pence, I would want him to tamper this down. Frankly, I mean, this isn't something that Governor Pence. I wouldn't want having this out there. But no one can really get inside the head of Mike Delph, and I'm certainly not going to try. It's a distraction, and it's unfortunate.
And the argument that this discussion is happening in Kentucky, so is that a good enough argument that it's Kentucky?
Like I said, it's something to throw out there, to see if it sticks. Like I said, number one, I doubt if it happens. Number two, I doubt if anybody would want to take advantage of it. Hoosiers are particularly funny. If this is a job you want, whether president or governor, then that's the job you should run.
I don't think we're funny. I don't think we're funny.
We're funny and serious.
Yeah,
and practical. The conversation between our insiders, you're getting well so well this new year. Hug each other. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion and stay up to date with Abdul, Lara, Jennifer, and of course Mary Beth throughout the week. Coming up, he's the president of Purdue University, but just how close did Mitch Daniels come to running for president of the United States? That's next on Indianapolis This Week. Back to Indianapolis this week. We also start the year by talking presidential ambitions. While political pundits focus on who will be running in 2016, we're getting an extraordinary new look inside Mitch Daniels' decision not to run for president in 2012 against Barack Obama, instead choosing to end his term as governor and become president of Purdue University. And we're getting it from a man who was a key part of the push to get him to run. We are now joined by Don Cogman, the author of the new book, Run, Mitch, Run, a longtime friend of former Governor Mitch Daniels. Welcome to the program. Why write the book now?
Well, it started out really as writing a piece of history for Mitch and the group of people that were involved and maybe some friends. And I never really thought it would end up being a published book. But as we got into it and started telling the story, people got interested in it. People got interested not only because of the story, but also because of so many other people right now are going through this same difficult process of making this big decision with their families. And so it was thought that it might be of interest to other people for that reason. And so we ended up having a book.
Take me to sort of the inner circle where the talk was, Governor, you need to run.
Well, there were really two main challenges in that, and one was to get him to be interested in making a decision to run. And then, of course, the second challenge was the family. When I first talked to him about this, his response was, you know, that truly is the dumbest idea you've ever come up with. And so he had no intention of ever running again for any office, never really even thought about the possibility of running for president, never.
Never, okay.
And when we came to him and said, you know, after reading an article in the Wall Street Journal that had been an interview by Kim Strassel, where she said, you know, a lot of people think you ought to run for president. You're one of the few popular Republicans in the country today. And his response was, well, don't say it by the phone. But that's the article that sort of generated a phone call from me to say, you know, would you be willing to talk about this? So literally for the first year, there was just a lot of hesitation on his part, but as the momentum sort of built, as so many people came forward and said, you know, the issue of the day, this was 2009, is fiscal discipline. That's your issue. You have a unique differentiation. You really ought to think about this. We got Mitch finally to the point where he said, you know, I think maybe I could do this, and I think I have something to contribute. But that was the first challenge, and I do think ultimately we got to the point where he would have said yes. The second challenge we didn't do so well on, and that was the family. Because really, this is a life-changing decision, not only for the candidate, but maybe even more so for the family. And they just didn't feel like this was what they wanted to spend the rest of their lives doing, which is very understandable. I think Mitch's opinion was that he could have won the primary, but would have had a difficulty in the general. Other people think that the difficult race would have been the primary, but that if he could have won the primary, that he really would have been a very competitive candidate in the general. I could talk to both sides of that. The truth is, I have no idea.
I want to read you a key phrase that Mitch wrote in the afterword for the book. He writes his words, "It's often observed that the crushing demands of modern presidential campaigns require candidates whose fixation on winning the prize versus on obsession. I'm not one of those either. As a friend said, as a presidential candidate, you'd have a fatal flaw. You can live without it."
He felt a call to service. He felt like he could do it. But in the end, it was not something that he was obsessed with. And I think his point there is that, you know, you obviously need to have it in your heart and soul if you make the decision to run, because it's a very difficult task. But for him, it wasn't an obsession. I think if he had made the decision to say yes, that he would have given it his all. But it wasn't something that he was going to live or die by.
Don Cogman, book, call again, Run, Mitch, Run. It's available everywhere, right?
It is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other places, iUniverse.
Mr. Cogman, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Please come back.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, big changes for thousands of drivers on Indiana roads. The DMV commissioner joins us to talk about those and much more next at Indianapolis This Week. Year brings a new set of rules for Indiana's highways, and specifically for what are called motor-driven cycles, such as motorcycles and scooters, a first of its kind of rules for the state of Indiana. Commissioner, thank you for joining us on this Sunday. So come Tuesday, when all branches are open, what do you want people to know about how to make sure that their motor-driven cycle is legal?
If they're planning on using them this winter, they need to come into the branch, get the proper license to drive the motor-driven cycle, and register it so that they can get a plate. Those are the two main requirements that people need to think about.
A lot went into this in order to make this uniform. So what is the goal with this? A lot of folks who may have one of these cycles, what was the goal behind this?
The legislature would have to answer that question in full, but I think their goal was a few things. First of all, safety. These laws limit the number of people that can ride on a motor-driven scooter, for instance. You have to have a helmet if you're under 18. You can only go certain speed limits depending on what kind you have, so there's a safety aspect to it. Also, there's a law enforcement aspect. The reason we want them registered, I think, is that when they're stolen, it's much easier to figure out who owns the motor-driven scooter. As of right now, there's no real way to know that for sure. And as to getting the right license, you want to make sure that people know what they're doing on the roads. Some basic test to determine, do you know the rules of the road?
Yeah, and it seems to me when we do put in guidelines, and it does raise the expectations for the rules of the road. Everyone now is sort of on parity, as opposed to just having people zooming by. We all will have some level of understanding that that person in that vehicle as well has to know what he or she is doing.
Right, and it depends on what kind of scooter you have. If it's the real light ones, the low-powered ones, you just take a real basic test to make sure you know what you're doing. If it's the bigger ones, it's more akin to the motorcycle test that you would take if you were getting a permit to drive a motorcycle.
Will you be collecting any data with this as well, just to see how the program does long-term?
Yes, we already have. I mean, I'm getting daily reports as to how many of these vehicles are registered, how many people are getting their credentials, how many people to take the test are passing the test. At the BMV, we do a lot of data mining, and then I get a lot of reports every day on a lot of things, and I've had some reports customized specifically for this so that I can watch this information as the days go by.
And last question, where do you think this will go in a year's time? Do you think other cycles will be included in this, or are you hoping to see? So where's the future of this?
I think that's a good question. I think we will probably gather all this information, see how the program has gone. Does it still make sense? Are there ways we can or should tweak the law to make it better, to make it more efficient, to make it more sensible? It's the first time for this, sure. So it isn't going to run exactly perfectly. We'll then confer with the legislature, maybe make some recommendations as to how it can be improved in the future. So it's not a static thing. It will change and improve over time.
Commissioner, thank you so much. Happy New Year, and come back anytime. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Details on all those rules on our website, theindychannel.com. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next week.